I can't marry you. I'm in love with my ex, she cried 2 weeks before the wedding. So I canceled everything and gave her what she wanted. The invitation samples arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I remember the moment clearly because I was standing in our kitchen, sunlight pouring through the windows. We'd spent an entire Saturday cleaning together, creating patterns on the marble countertop we'd picked out after visiting 17 different showrooms. The smell of the lasagna I was preparing for dinner filled the apartment, mixing with the vanilla candle Simone always kept burning on the bookshelf. I held one of the invitations up to the light, admiring the gold embossing that spelled out our names in elegant script. It felt real in a way nothing else had, tangible proof that in exactly 14 days, I would marry the woman I'd loved for 4 years. Hello friends, before I continue the story, please support the channel by becoming a subscriber and giving the video a like. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching right now. Simone was in the living room, surrounded by what looked like the entire contents of a craft store. Ribbons, small glass bottles, tiny cards with our initials intertwined, and about 1,000 other details I couldn't name were spread across every surface. She'd been working on wedding favors for the past 3 hours, her face set in that concentrated expression she got when she was deep into a project. Her natural hair was pulled back in a silk scarf, and she wore my old Howard University sweatshirt, the one with the bleach stain on the sleeve. "Marcus, come look at this," she called out, holding up 2 small bottles filled with what looked like honey. "Do you think the lavender label or the sage green label looks better?" I walked over, wiping tomato sauce from my hands onto the dish towel I'd thrown over my shoulder. Both looked identical to me, but I'd learned early in our relationship that they looked the same was never the answer Simone wanted to hear. I studied them with exaggerated seriousness, tilting my head like I was examining a blueprint for one of the buildings my architecture firm was designing. The truth was, I didn't care about the labels, the flowers, the seating charts, or any of the 1,000 tiny decisions that had consumed our lives for the past 8 months. I cared about her, about the life we were building, about waking up every morning knowing she was mine. "Lavender," I said finally, kissing her forehead. "It matches your bridesmaid dresses better." She smiled, but I noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes, didn't light up her whole face the way her smiles usually did. I'd been noticing that for weeks now, that distant quality to her expressions, like she was present but not fully there. She'd explained it away as wedding stress, as the pressure of coordinating her demanding job as an events coordinator with planning her own wedding, the ultimate irony she joked about constantly. I believed her because I wanted to, because the alternative was a question I didn't want to ask. That night, everything I believed shattered into pieces I'd spend months trying to sweep up. I was in the bathroom, flossing my teeth and mentally reviewing the next day's presentation to a potential client, when I heard Simone's voice from the bedroom. Her tone was strange, tight and strained, like someone trying to force words through a throat that didn't want to release them. "Marcus," she said, just my name, but the weight of it made my hands freeze mid-motion. I rinsed my mouth, my reflection in the mirror showing a man who didn't yet know his life was about to implode. I walked into our bedroom to find her sitting on the edge of the bed we'd picked out together at that boutique furniture store in Brooklyn. She wasn't looking at me, just staring at her hands folded in her lap, her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. The bedside lamp cast shadows across her face, making her beautiful features look haunted and unfamiliar. For a wild second, I thought she was going to tell me she was sick, that something was medically wrong, and my mind started racing through hospitals and treatments. "We need to talk," she said, and somehow those 4 words contained more pain than I'd known language could hold. "Okay," I said slowly, sitting down next to her, not touching her but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her body. My heart was already racing, that primal part of my brain that senses danger before the conscious mind catches up. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thick, like the atmospheric pressure had changed and I was struggling to breathe normally. "What's going on, baby? Talk to me." She finally looked up, and her eyes were swimming with tears that hadn't yet fallen, balanced on her lower lids like they were waiting for permission. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. The tears fell then, tracking down her cheeks in twin streams that she didn't bother to wipe away. "I can't marry you, Marcus. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The words were English, words I understood individually, but strung together in that sequence they made no sense, like someone had handed me a blueprint with all the measurements in a language I'd never learned. "What?" The word came out flat, emotionless, my brain refusing to process what my ears had just heard. I stood up without meaning to, my body moving on autopilot while my mind struggled to catch up to this new reality. I walked to the window, looking out at the street below where normal people were living normal lives, unaware that in this apartment on the 4th floor, a man's entire future was being dismantled. Is this cold feet? Because Simone, that's normal. Everyone says that's completely normal before a wedding. My reflection in the window showed a man pleading, and I hated how desperate I looked. "It's not cold feet," she said behind me, her voice thick with tears but also something else, something that sounded almost like relief. That relief in her voice cut deeper than the words themselves, suggesting she'd been carrying this burden for a while and was finally setting it down. "It's Darren. I'm in love with Darren." The name hit me like a physical blow, forcing the air from my lungs in a rush that left me dizzy. Darren. Her ex-boyfriend from college? The one she'd dated for 3 years before he'd broken her heart by cheating on her with her roommate. The one whose name had come up maybe 5 times in 4 years, always in the context of worst relationship of my life, and taught me what I didn't want. The one I'd spent our entire relationship being the opposite of, being faithful and steady and present and everything he apparently hadn't been. "Darren?" I repeated, turning to look at her, needing to see her face when she confirmed this insanity. "Your ex Darren? The one who cheated on you? That Darren?" She nodded, fresh sobs racking her body as she pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small on our bed. She looked like a child confessing to breaking something valuable, terrified of the consequences but unable to keep the secret any longer. "He reached out 6 months ago," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush now that the dam had broken. "He apologized for everything, said he'd grown up, said he'd never stopped loving me. We started talking, just as friends. I swear it started as just friends. Each revelation was another knife. 6 months of lies while we'd been picking out flowers and tasting cakes and building what I'd thought was our future. 6 months. I heard my voice rise, the first crack in the calm exterior I'd been maintaining. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to push back the rage and hurt that were fighting for dominance in my chest. "You've been emotionally cheating on me for 6 months while we planned our wedding?" The question hung in the air, rhetorical because we both knew the answer. I dropped my hands and looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing Simone's face. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she cried, the classic refrain of every cheater in history, as if intention somehow absolved action. She was crying harder now, her whole body shaking, and the part of me that had loved her for 4 years wanted to comfort her even as the rest of me wanted to scream. Every time I tried to stop talking to him, every time I told myself I was being crazy, "I'd see you and feel nothing but safe and comfortable and predictable." She said those words like they were failures, like the stability I'd offered was somehow a character flaw. "With Darren, I feel alive, Marcus. I feel passion. With you, I feel like I'm settling." The word settling echoed in my ears, drowning out everything else she was saying. For years of love letters and surprise dates and building a home together reduced to settling. As if I were a consolation prize, she'd finally worked up the courage to refuse. I looked around our bedroom, at the photos of us in Aruba on the dresser, at the mix of our clothes in the open closet, at the stack of RSVPs on her nightstand showing 150 people who'd confirmed they'd be attending our wedding in 2 weeks. All of it was a lie, or at least built on a foundation that had been crumbling for half a year while I'd been blissfully ignorant. The man I'd been 20 minutes ago, flossing his teeth and thinking about client presentations, seemed impossibly naive. That man would have fallen to his knees and begged. He would have promised to be more exciting, more passionate, less stable and predictable. He would have listed every beautiful memory we'd shared, would have reminded her of the time she told her best friend I was the one, would have fought with everything he had to save this relationship. But that man was gone, killed by the word settling, and the name Darren, and the casual revelation of 6 months of betrayal. In his place was someone colder, someone clearer, someone who could see the pathetic narrative she'd constructed for herself. I looked at her, at this woman sobbing on our bed because she'd broken her own heart by destroying mine, and felt nothing but a vast, echoing emptiness. She'd cast herself as the tragic heroine in some grand romance, torn between safe, boring Marcus and passionate, exciting Darren. She expected me to play my role, to beg and plead and make her feel important enough to fight for. I would not give her that satisfaction. I would not be a supporting character in her delusional fantasy. Okay, I said, the word cold and final in the space between us. I walked to the closet and pulled out the duffel bag I used for gym clothes, started filling it with enough clothes for a few days. My hands were steady, my movements deliberate, and I could feel her staring at me in shock. Okay? That's all you're going to say. Her voice was high and incredulous, like I'd missed my cue in a play she'd been directing. Aren't you going to fight for us? Aren't you going to try to change my mind? I paused, a shirt halfway into the bag, and looked at her over my shoulder. The question was so absurd, so fundamentally lacking in self-awareness, that I almost laughed. Simone? I said, my voice deadly calm. You just told me you've been in love with another man for 6 months while planning our wedding. You told me I make you feel like you're settling. What exactly would you like me to fight for? Your right to betray me? Your right to make me your backup plan while you chase someone who already proved he doesn't value you. I zipped the bag closed with a sharp motion that punctuated my words. She flinched like I'd slapped her, which I suppose in a way I had, with the truth she'd expected me to tiptoe around. That's not fair, she said weakly, the tears still falling but her voice taking on a defensive edge. I'm trying to be honest with you. I'm trying to do the right thing. The hypocrisy was so vast, so breathtaking, that this time I did laugh, a short, bitter sound that didn't contain any humor. The right thing, I repeated, slinging the bag over my shoulder. The right thing would have been not emotionally cheating on me for half a year. The right thing would have been breaking up with me before we sent out invitations and signed a lease on this apartment together. The right thing would have been respecting me enough to not waste 2 weeks before our wedding to drop this bomb. I walked toward the door, each step feeling like I was moving through water, everything slow and surreal. But you didn't want to do the right thing, you wanted to have your cake and eat it too. And now that you've finally chosen, you want me to make you feel better about your choice. I stopped at the bedroom door and looked back one last time. She was still on the bed, no longer crying but staring at me with an expression of shocked hurt, like she couldn't believe I wasn't following the script she'd written. I hope Darren gives you everything you're looking for, I said, and meant it in the most cutting way possible. I hope the passion and the excitement are worth what you threw away. Then I walked out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, and out of the life we'd built together. The first night I stayed at my boy Kevin's apartment, sleeping on his couch and staring at the ceiling while he tactfully gave me space. Kevin had been my roommate at Howard, my groomsman, and the kind of friend who didn't ask questions when you showed up at his door at 11 p.m. with a duffel bag and a dead look in your eyes. He handed me a beer, showed me where the extra blankets were, and said, "When you're ready to talk, I'm here." I wasn't ready to talk, might never be ready to talk, but I was grateful for the offer. The second night I stayed at my parents' house in Silver Spring, my mother fussing over me while my father sat quietly, his anger at Simone a palpable presence in the room. My mother had always loved Simone, had welcomed her into the family with open arms and enthusiastic plans for grandbabies. Now she moved around the house erasing evidence of her, turning over the photo on the mantel, putting away the bridal magazine she'd left on the coffee table during her last visit. "That girl was a fool," my mother said, setting a plate of food in front of me that I had no appetite for. "An absolute fool to let you go." The third night I checked into an extended stay hotel, unable to bear anyone's sympathy or anger on my behalf any longer. I needed silence and solitude to process what had happened, to feel the full weight of it without an audience. The room was generic and impersonal, exactly what I needed, a space that held no memories of her. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself feel it, really feel it, the betrayal and the hurt and the rage. I didn't cry, which surprised me, but I did sit there for hours, my mind cataloging every moment of the past 6 months, searching for clues I'd missed. The fourth day I woke up, and the grief was still there, a heavy weight on my chest, but alongside it was something else. Clarity, sharp and crystalline and cold as ice. I'd spent 3 days wallowing, which was 3 days more than she deserved. She'd made her choice, and now I would make mine. I would not be the pathetic ex-fiancé pining for a woman who'd discarded him, would not spend months trying to win her back or prove my worth to someone who'd already deemed me unworthy. I would do what I did best. I would build something new from the rubble she'd left behind. I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet, the same way I'd approached every major project in my life. At the top I wrote, Operation Clean Break, and began listing every single thread that connected me to Simone. The wedding vendor contracts, the apartment lease, the joint gym membership, the shared cell phone plan, the mingled friend groups. Every single point of contact needed to be severed cleanly and completely. I would approach this like I approached my architecture projects, with methodical precision and zero emotional attachment to the outcome. The first call was to the wedding venue, an elegant estate in Virginia wine country that we'd booked 18 months ago. The coordinator, Michelle, answered with her usual cheerful professionalism, probably expecting a question about table arrangements or the timeline for the day. Marcus, hi. I was just thinking about you too. Did you finalize the decision on the champagne? Her enthusiasm made what I was about to do feel even more surreal. Michelle, I need to cancel the wedding, I said, my voice flat and businesslike. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head, had stripped it of all emotion and reduced it to a simple transaction. The engagement is over. I'll take full responsibility for all cancellation fees and any deposits you need to keep. Please send the final invoice to my email. There was a beat of shocked silence on the other end, and I could almost hear her mind scrambling to find the appropriate response. Oh my God, Marcus, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice dropping to that hushed tone people use when discussing tragedy. Is there anything, is this absolutely final? Sometimes couples just need a little time. She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable but trying to be helpful in the only way she knew how. I appreciated the attempt even as I shut it down. It's final, I said, cutting off that line of inquiry before it could develop. She's in love with someone else, has been for months. There's no coming back from that. I was brutally honest, partly because it forestalled further questions and partly because I wanted these people to know who'd really ended things. Let the story spread. Let Simone deal with the social consequences of her choices. Again, I apologize for any inconvenience this causes you and your staff. The next 12 calls followed the same pattern, a script I refined with each conversation. The caterer, the florist, the band, the photographer, the hotel block, each one met with my calm, clinical honesty about why. The bride has chosen to pursue a relationship with her ex-boyfriend. The engagement ended due to infidelity. She's in love with someone else. I used the words like weapons, sharp and precise, cutting through any potential sympathy for her position. By the 6th call, I'd perfected the tone, regretful but firm, a man handling an unfortunate situation with grace and maturity. Some of them tried to offer condolences, to tell me they were sorry, to suggest I take some time before making final decisions. I thanked them politely and moved forward with the cancellations anyway, my resolve never wavering. A few of them, I could tell, were already mentally composing the gossip they'd share with colleagues and friends. The juicy story of the jilted groom and the faithless bride. That was fine. Let the story spread. Truth was a better weapon than any lie I could have constructed. By noon, I'd dismantled an entire wedding, reducing hundreds of hours of planning to a series of canceled contracts and final invoices. The financial hit was substantial, tens of thousands of dollars in non-refundable deposits and cancellation fees, but I didn't care. Money could be earned again, rebuilt, replaced. The time I'd have wasted trying to salvage a relationship with someone capable of such sustained betrayal was invaluable. I was buying my freedom, and it was worth every penny. The hardest call was to my grandmother, who at 83 had been so excited to see her first grandchild get married. She'd already bought her dress, had been practicing the family recipes she'd planned to contribute to the rehearsal dinner. "Baby boy," she said when I told her, her voice cracking with emotion. "That girl don't know what she's giving up. You're going to be just fine. You hear me? Better than fine." Her faith in me, unshakable and absolute, was the first thing that made my composure waver. "I know, Grandma," I said, my voice rough with emotions I wouldn't let myself fully feel. "I just need some time to figure things out." We talked for another 20 minutes, her telling me stories about my grandfather, about their marriage, about the time she'd almost called off their wedding over cold feet. "But baby, cold feet and a cold heart are different things," she said. "That girl's got a cold heart if she could do this to you. You grieve what you need to grieve, then you hold your head high and move forward." The apartment was the next problem to solve, and I approached it with the same ruthless efficiency. Our lease didn't expire for another 11 months. Both our names on the contract, our security deposits mingled in the landlord's account. I called Simone, the first time I'd initiated contact since walking out 3 days ago. She answered on the first ring, her voice eager and pathetic. "Marcus? Oh my God. I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk about everything." "This isn't a conversation," I interrupted, my voice cold enough to freeze the desperate hope I could hear building in her tone. "I'm calling about the apartment. I'll buy out my portion of the lease. I want my name off it by the end of the month. Send me the amount I owe, and I'll wire it to the landlord directly." There was silence on the other end, the sound of her recalibrating, realizing this wasn't the reconciliation call she'd been hoping for. "You're just going to leave? Just like that?" Her voice had shifted from hope to anger, the defensive fury of someone confronted with consequences they hadn't fully anticipated. "We've been together for 4 years, Marcus. 4 years. Don't I deserve more than you just running away?" The audacity of the question, the sheer unmitigated gall, almost made me laugh. "What you deserved," I said, each word carefully enunciated, "was a partner who respected you enough to be honest instead of stringing you along while pursuing someone else. Unfortunately, that's not what you gave me, so I don't feel particularly concerned about what you think you deserve now." I could hear her sharp intake of breath, could imagine her face flushing with anger and shame. "Send me the numbers by tomorrow, or I'll have my lawyer handle it." I hung up before she could respond, blocked her number immediately after. That was the last direct communication we would have if I had anything to say about it. Every remaining entanglement would be handled through intermediaries or legal channels, buffers that would prevent her from trying to engage me emotionally. I was a ghost to her now, present only as a name on documents that needed signing. The next item on my spreadsheet was more complicated, the architecture firm where I was a junior partner. I loved my job, loved the work, loved most of the people I worked with. But the office was in the city was full of places Simone and I had made memories, and her best friend Tasha worked in the HR department of a company 2 floors down in our building. I'd run into her in the elevator at least twice a week, and every encounter would be an opportunity for information to flow back to Simone, for my life to remain entangled with hers. I requested a meeting with the senior partners, Thomas and Richard, 2 men who'd mentored me since I joined the firm 5 years ago. They sat across from me in the conference room, their faces grave as I explained the situation, professional enough not to pry but clearly concerned. "I need a change," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. "I know we have a satellite office in Portland. I'd like to request a transfer, effective as soon as it can be arranged." Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying me with the assessing gaze that had made him one of the most successful architects on the East Coast. "Marcus, you're one of our brightest talents. We don't want to lose you, but I'll be honest, we've been looking for someone to manage the Portland office, someone with your vision and leadership skills." He exchanged a look with Richard, some silent communication passing between them. "If you're serious about this, we can make it happen within the month. But are you sure you want to make such a big decision right now? You've just been through a trauma." "I'm not running away," I said, though we all knew that was at least partly a lie. "I'm choosing to build something new somewhere that doesn't have her fingerprints all over it. Every restaurant, every park, every street corner in this city has a memory attached. I can't heal if I'm constantly walking through a graveyard of what used to be. They both nodded, understanding in a way that told me they'd both survived their own heartbreaks in younger years. Portland is a clean slate. I can do good work there. The transfer was approved by the end of the day. My start date set for 4 weeks out. For weeks to pack up a life, to sell or donate everything that wouldn't fit in my car, to say goodbye to a city I'd lived in for 15 years. It should have felt rushed, chaotic, overwhelming. Instead, it felt like liberation, like I was a prisoner who'd just been handed the keys to his own cell. I found a loft apartment in Portland's Pearl District through a virtual tour, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city and the mountains beyond. It was modern and anonymous and completely devoid of memories. Perfect. I signed the lease, paid the deposit, and scheduled movers to transport my furniture, the pieces that were mine before Simone, before us. Everything we'd bought together would stay in the old apartment, artifacts of a life I was leaving behind. The social media accounts were next, and these I handled with surgical precision. I didn't post some dramatic announcement or change my relationship status with a broken heart emoji. I simply deactivated everything: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, every platform where I existed digitally. Let people wonder, let them reach out to mutual friends for information. Let Simone deal with the questions about where I'd gone and why I wasn't posting anymore. I was a ghost now, haunting a different coast. The mutual friends were harder to categorize, a complicated web of relationships that would need to be sorted into his, hers, and Switzerland. I made a list, brutally honest about which friendships had really been mine and which had been maintained primarily through Simone's social efforts. Kevin and my boys from Howard were definitely mine, as were a few colleagues from work. The couples we'd been friends with, the people we'd had dinner parties and game nights with, most of those I ceded to her without a fight. There was one exception: Jordan and his wife Lisa, a couple we'd met at a design conference 3 years ago and bonded with over a shared love of mid-century modern architecture and terrible horror movies. I called Jordan directly, not wanting him to hear the news through the grapevine. "Man, I need to tell you something," I said when he answered. "Simone and I split up. The wedding's off. I'm moving to Portland in a few weeks." "What? No way, man, what happened?" Jordan's shock was genuine, and I appreciated that he didn't try to hide it behind platitudes. We'd had enough double dates, enough late-night conversations, that he'd seen our relationship as solid. "I thought you two were the real deal. I literally told Lisa last week that if you guys could make it work, there was hope for the rest of us." I gave him the abbreviated version, clinical and factual. "She's been in love with her ex for 6 months, decided 2 weeks before the wedding that she couldn't go through with it. So I'm moving on, literally." There was a long silence on the other end, and I could hear Lisa in the background asking what was wrong. "You guys have been great friends, but I understand if this puts you in an awkward position. I don't want to force anyone to choose sides." "Screw that," Jordan said emphatically, and I could hear the anger in his voice, anger on my behalf. "That's messed up, man. 6 months? While you were planning a wedding. Nah. Lisa and I are on your side 100%. I heard Lisa's voice in the background, louder now, saying something that sounded like, "She did what? Listen, before you leave town, we're taking you to dinner. No arguments. You're not leaving DC thinking all your friends are as fake as your ex." That dinner, 2 weeks later at a steakhouse in Georgetown, was the first time I'd laughed since everything imploded. Jordan and Lisa were furious on my behalf in a way that felt validating, ranting about Simone's selfishness and Darren's audacity and the general terribleness of people who couldn't appreciate what they had. "You're going to kill it in Portland," Lisa said, raising her wine glass in a toast. "New city, fresh start, and when you're ready, the dating scene there is supposed to be amazing. Smart, creative women. Your stock's about to go way up." "I don't know about dating," I said honestly, taking a sip of the bourbon I'd been nursing all night. "Right now, I just want to focus on work, on building something that's entirely mine." Even as I said it, I knew it was true. The idea of trusting someone again, of making myself vulnerable enough to build a life with another person, felt impossible. Simone had taught me that even 4 years and a ring weren't enough to guarantee loyalty. The final 2 weeks in DC passed in a blur of packing and paperwork and goodbyes. I saw my family, sat through my mother's tears and my father's stern advice about not letting this make me bitter. I had drinks with Kevin and the guys, accepted their offers to visit Portland and their assurances that I was doing the right thing. I drove past the old apartment once, late at night, and saw the lights on in what had been our bedroom. I didn't stop, didn't even slow down, just kept driving until the building disappeared in my rearview mirror. On my last night in DC, I slept in a hotel near the highway, my car packed with everything I owned. The city I'd called home for 15 years was now just a place I used to live, geography with no emotional attachment. I'd successfully severed every connection, canceled every vendor, dissolved every shared account, and blocked every number. Simone existed now only as a name on some final paperwork my lawyer was handling, the division of the security deposit and some minor financial loose ends. I didn't think about her as I pulled onto I-70 West the next morning, the sun rising behind me and the mountains somewhere ahead. I thought about the Portland office, about the projects I'd be leading, about the loft with the big windows waiting for me. I thought about my grandmother's words, about holding my head high and moving forward. The grief was there, a dull ache in my chest that I knew would take time to fully heal, but it wasn't overwhelming anymore. It was just another thing I was carrying, and I'd carried heavier. Portland welcomed me with rain, a steady drizzle that lasted my entire first week and felt cleansing somehow. The loft was perfect, even better in person than in the virtual tour, and I spent my first weekend there buying plants and art and making it mine. The office was smaller than DC but filled with talented people excited to have fresh leadership and new ideas. I threw myself into work with an intensity that probably wasn't entirely healthy, staying late and volunteering for the most complex projects. My new routine was simple and solitary. Morning runs along the Willamette River, long days at the office, evenings exploring the city's food scene or hiking in Forest Park. I made a rule for myself: no social media, no checking up on Simone through mutual friends, no looking backward at all. Portland was present and future, DC was past, and I would keep them separated as completely as I'd separated our finances. The first time someone asked me if I was single, a barista with kind eyes and a sleeve of tattoos, I said yes and meant it. For 3 months, I was successful in maintaining the complete separation. I'd settled into my new life, made friends with some colleagues, even went on a few casual dates that went nowhere but proved I was capable of enjoying someone's company without the ghost of betrayal hovering over everything. I thought I'd really done it, had completely exorcised Simone from my system and moved on to a healthier, better version of myself. Then Kevin called, and the carefully constructed wall between past and present crumbled just a little. "Man, I don't know if I should tell you this," Kevin said, his voice careful in the way that meant he definitely was going to tell me and was just giving me a chance to stop him. "But I figure you'd rather hear it from me than run into it accidentally online or something." My stomach tightened, the Pavlovian response to incoming information about her that I couldn't quite suppress. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Simone and Darren broke up," Kevin said, getting straight to it, ripping the band-aid off quickly. Apparently he was cheating on her the whole time, like actively seeing multiple other women. She found out about a month ago, and it's been a whole dramatic mess. Tasha says she's completely devastated. Had to move back in with her parents. He paused, waiting for my reaction, but I was too busy processing to give him one immediately. The irony was so perfect, so poetically just, that I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped. She'd blown up her life for a man who'd already proven himself untrustworthy, and he'd proven it again in exactly the same way. "Wow," I said, and meant it. I can't say I'm surprised, but wow. I waited for the surge of satisfaction, the vindictive pleasure that was supposed to come from karma delivering such a perfect blow. It didn't come. Instead, I just felt tired and a little sad for who she used to be. "There's more," Kevin said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "She's been asking about you. Wants to know where you are, how you're doing, if you're seeing anyone. She's been calling your parents' house, but your mom won't tell her anything. I think she wants to reach out, maybe try to apologize or something." The warning was clear. He was giving me a heads up that she might try to breach the walls I'd built. "Thanks for the warning," I said, meaning it, "but she doesn't have my new number. doesn't know where I live, and I'm not on social media anymore. Unless you're planning to give her my information, there's no way for her to reach me. I let that statement hang there, the implied question obvious. Kevin had been my friend first, long before he'd known Simone, but I needed to hear him say it. Man, come on, you know I wouldn't do that, Kevin said, sounding offended that I'd even implied the possibility. Your business is your business. If you wanted her to know how to find you, you'd have left a forwarding address. We talked for a few more minutes about his life, his job, the mutual friends we still shared. When we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights and thinking about Simone for the first time in weeks. I felt nothing but a distant, clinical curiosity about her situation. There was no part of me that wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, to take any satisfaction in her suffering. She'd made her choices, and those choices had consequences, just like mine had. My consequence was a new life in a new city where I was building something solid and good. Her consequence was exactly what I'd predicted, the realization that the grass wasn't greener, just different grass covering the same old dirt. The attempted contact came 2 weeks later, not from Simone but from her mother, Barbara. I was in a meeting when my phone vibrated with a call from a DC area code I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, then later, during a break, I listened to the message she'd left. Marcus, this is Barbara Crawford, Simone's mother. I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone in this family, but I hoped you might pick up. Simone is in a very bad way, dear. I think she's realized what a terrible mistake she made. If you could find it in your heart to just call her, just speak to her for a few minutes, I think it would help her healing process. You were always such a good man, such a steadying influence on her. Please, just think about it. The message was a masterpiece of manipulation, appealing to my better nature, to my history as the good man who'd always been there for Simone. It was designed to make me feel responsible for her emotional well-being, to suggest that I owed her the closure or comfort or whatever she was seeking. I deleted it without saving it, then blocked that number too. Her mother had been kind to me during our relationship, had welcomed me warmly and treated me like family, but that didn't obligate me to set myself on fire to keep Simone warm. The emails started after that, sent from new addresses that made it past my filters before I could block them. They were long, rambling, alternating between apologetic and accusatory in ways that revealed just how unstable her mental state had become. I know I hurt you, but you abandoned me when I needed you most. Darren wasn't who I thought he was, but at least he fought for me. You just gave up. I was confused and scared, and you were supposed to love me unconditionally. Each one revealed more about who she really was, someone fundamentally incapable of taking responsibility for her own choices. I didn't respond to any of them, just created a filter that sent anything from her straight to trash without me having to see it. Engaging with her, even to tell her to stop, would be giving her what she wanted, proof that I still cared enough to respond. My silence was the most complete rejection I could offer, a void where her words disappeared without acknowledgement or reaction. After a month, the emails slowed, then stopped entirely, and I assumed she'd finally gotten the message. Life continued in Portland, and I continued to build. I was promoted to lead architect on a major downtown development, a mixed-use complex that would redefine a whole neighborhood. I joined a gym and actually started rock climbing on weekends, made friends with a group of designers and artists who knew nothing about my past. I dated a marketing executive named Alicia for 3 months, a casual thing that ended amicably when she took a job in San Francisco. It was healthy and normal and proof that I was capable of connection without catastrophe. A year after I'd left DC, my firm sent me back for a client meeting, a potential contract with a museum that wanted to expand. It was my first time back in the city, and I debated declining the trip, sending one of my associates instead. But that felt like cowardice, like I was still letting Simone dictate my life by avoiding places she might be. I was a different person now, stronger and clearer about what I wanted and what I deserved. A few days in my old city wouldn't undo the work I'd done. The meeting went well, the museum board loved our proposal, and I had an afternoon to kill before my flight back. I found myself walking through Georgetown, past the steakhouse where Jordan and Lisa had taken me for that last dinner, past the bookstore where Simone and I used to spend Saturday afternoons. The memories were there, But they didn't hurt anymore, just faded photographs of someone else's life. I stopped at a coffee shop I'd never been to before, deliberately choosing somewhere with no history, and ordered a black coffee. I was standing at the pickup counter checking my phone when I heard her voice. Marcus. It was smaller than I remembered, tentative, and when I turned around, I barely recognized her. Simone looked worn, her hair different and her clothes hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight in an unhealthy way. Her eyes had dark circles under them, and there was a desperate, hungry look in them that made me uncomfortable. "Hi, Simone," I said, my voice neutral, as if she were an acquaintance I barely remembered. "I can't believe it's you," she said, moving closer, her hands clutching her purse strap like a lifeline. "I've been hoping I'd run into you. Your mom said you were doing well, but she wouldn't tell me anything else. You look great." The last part was said with a note of resentment, like my well-being was somehow an affront. "Can we talk, please? Just for a few minutes." I glanced at my watch, calculating. My flight wasn't for 3 hours, and the airport was 20 minutes away. I had time, and more importantly, I had the clarity and strength to handle this conversation without it destroying me. "All right," I said, grabbing my coffee from the counter. "There's a table in the corner." We sat, and the silence stretched between us until she finally broke it with a flood of words that had clearly been building for months. "I've been such a mess, Marcus," she said, the words tumbling out. "Darren was a nightmare. He was cheating on me with 3 different women, maybe more. He never wanted a real relationship, he just wanted the thrill of stealing a bride. I lost my job because I couldn't focus, lost most of my friends because they all took your side. I had to move back in with my parents. And every day I wake up and realize what I threw away." The tears started then, tracking down her face in a way that might have moved me once. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said, and meant it in the abstract way you're sorry about any human suffering. "Darren sounds like he was exactly who he proved himself to be the first time. I hope you've learned from the experience." My voice was kind but distant, the tone you'd use with a stranger sharing their problems on a park bench. She looked at me like I'd slapped her, clearly expecting more sympathy, more engagement. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" Her voice rose slightly, drawing looks from other patrons. "I'm pouring my heart out to you, telling you how much I've suffered, and you're giving me therapy speak?" The entitlement was stunning, the assumption that my purpose was still to manage her emotions and make her feel better about herself. "What did you expect, Marcus? Did you expect me to be perfect? Everyone makes mistakes." I took a sip of my coffee, letting her words hang in the air unanswered for a long moment. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm and measured, every word chosen with precision. "Simone, you didn't make a mistake. Mistakes are accidental. You made a series of conscious choices over 6 months. You chose to engage with Darren. You chose to hide it from me. You chose to compare our relationship to what you imagined his passion was. You chose to wait until 2 weeks before our wedding to tell me. Those weren't mistakes, they were decisions, and decisions have consequences." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to formulate an argument but couldn't find the words. Finally, she landed on, "So you're just going to be cruel? You're going to punish me forever for being honest with you about my feelings?" The rewriting of history was remarkable, as if her honesty had been some noble act rather than a bomb dropped on my life. "I'm not punishing you," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I'm just not rescuing you from the consequences of your own actions. There's a difference." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman I'd loved but a stranger who'd taught me valuable lessons about trust and self-worth. "You said I made you feel safe and comfortable, like you were settling. Do you remember that? You threw away safe and comfortable for passionate and exciting, and it turned out passionate and exciting was also cruel and unfaithful. That's not my problem to solve." "I was wrong," she said desperately, reaching across the table like she was going to grab my hand before thinking better of it. "I was so wrong about everything. What we had was good, it was real, and I was too stupid to see it. Can't we just start over? Can't you forgive me?" The plea in her voice was raw and genuine, the sound of someone who'd hit rock bottom and was looking for a rope. I felt nothing but a distant pity, the kind you feel watching a sad movie about people whose choices you can't understand. No, I said simply, the word final and complete. I forgave you months ago, Simone, because holding on to anger was poisoning me. But forgiving you doesn't mean taking you back. Forgiving you doesn't mean pretending you didn't show me exactly who you are when the going got tough. I stood up, gathering my coffee and my phone. I hope you put your life back together. I hope you learn from this. But I won't be part of your rebuilding process. So that's it, she said, her voice breaking. For years together and you're just going to walk away without looking back? The irony of her saying those words, of accusing me of the very thing she'd done, was so rich that I almost laughed. After everything, you don't feel anything for me at all? I looked down at her, at this woman who'd once been my entire future, and told her the absolute truth. I feel grateful, I said, watching her face crumple at the word. I'm grateful you showed me who you really were before we got married, before we had kids, before I wasted even more years on someone who saw me as a safety net instead of a partner. You did me a favor, Simone, even if you didn't mean to. I picked up my bag and slung it over my shoulder. Take care of yourself. I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back, didn't watch through the window to see if she was crying or calling after me. I got in my Uber to the airport and felt lighter than I had in a year, the final ghost exorcised. She'd wanted closure, wanted me to absolve her or yell at her or give her some big emotional scene that would let her feel like we'd had a proper ending. Instead, I'd given her the truth. I was over it, over her, and over the version of myself that would have begged her to stay. The flight back to Portland was smooth, and I spent it reviewing the museum proposal, making notes for improvements. When the plane touched down and I saw the mountains in the distance, I felt a sense of homecoming that DC had never inspired. This was where I lived now, where I was building a life that was entirely mine. The coffee shop encounter had been a final test, and I'd passed with flying colors. Thank you for watching all the way through. There's another story to your left screen. You'll enjoy it more than this one.